The following video has been rated PG-13 for, it's pretty good, if you're 13. Just boring!
The year is 1955. The average cost of a new house is $10,950, and a gallon of gas is 23 cents. The average yearly wage is $4,130, and for the first time ever, 7 out of 10 American families own a car. McDonald's opens its doors in California. Highways continue to spread out across America, and more families leave the big cities and sprawl to the suburbs, while consumerism hits an all-time high in Eisenhower's America. In a small but growing Central Florida urban center called Orlando, the population of not quite 60,000 people watches as Walt Disney welcomes the first guests to his incredible Los Angeles area theme park, Disneyland, blissfully unaware of just how much this would transform their own city just 16 short years later. Just north of the center of downtown Orlando, on a street called Colonial Avenue, a large commercial development project is about to debut that will, over its roughly 40-year history, help shape the region and how shopping has been viewed as a whole across the entire country. Join us today as we do just a little Splorin. Until 1955, Orlando was like most other urban centers in America, if maybe on a somewhat smaller scale. The majority of the population lived, worked, played, and shopped in or nearby to the city center. A reliance on infrastructure and public transportation had traditionally made this the most efficient model for daily life in the big city. And, like most other growing cities, Orlando had its own popular areas for commerce. Orange Avenue was arguably the heart of downtown Orlando's retail offerings, with department stores such as Sears, Rutland's, and Woolworth's gracing the streets. Now, while Orlando was still a small urban area compared to other Florida hubs like Miami, Tampa, and Jacksonville, it was still considered to be an up-and-coming destination, thanks in part to its Central Florida location, its relatively easy access to the highway, and its increasingly popular status as a tourist destination, even in the pre-theme park 1950s. Because of this, the area was chosen to be the home of a new kind of retail center, the first of its kind for the state and the largest of its kind south of Atlanta. Securing a large swath of land that had previously been used as a cow pasture from the T.G. Lee Dairy Company, architect Morris Lapidus designed a large upscale shopping destination for financiers Michael R. Sudoku and contractor, the R.M. Thompson Company. This project would be named Colonial Plaza, and it was at the time the largest retail development project in Florida. Officially breaking ground in 1954, the project would go on to take nearly 2 years to complete Phase 1, opening for business on January 31st, 1956. The original tenants for the plaza included 2 supermarkets, Florida-based Publix, which opened the largest supermarket in Central Florida at 22,000 square feet, and a national chain, A&P. Other tenants on opening day included variety retailer W.T. Grant with a 31,000 square foot store and a 5 and dime store called McCrory. A Walgreens pharmacy, which had previously operated downtown, relocated to a large 2-story storefront at Colonial Plaza and was soon joined by a dry cleaner, a television showroom, a camera shop, a handful of local clothiers, a shoe repair shop, and 2 national footwear chains. All in all, 24 businesses included the popular Ronnie's restaurant would open in the large facility, which would now typically be referred to as a strip mall. At $3 million, the facility, which housed roughly 20 acres of retail space and 2,000 parking spots, was considered to be almost unimaginably large at the time. While each business featured an overhang to keep shoppers somewhat shielded from the worst of the elements, it would still be several years before the plaza would begin to build its famous indoor Phase 2, which would add to the strip a closed roof and a climate-controlled center for even larger growth.
Now, while the offerings of what we would now call a strip mall might seem pretty humble by today's standards, at the time they were absolutely cataclysmic to the original shops downtown in Orlando, who found that their sales were dramatically reduced as the people in Orlando and around Orlando were choosing the convenience and the spectacle of one-stop shopping over at Colonial Plaza.
As more families began to enjoy the benefits of car ownership, populations began to move away from downtown centers and outlying areas that offered larger tracts of relatively inexpensive land for commercial growth were ready to take advantage of America's newfound mobility.
Now, while the downtown department stores began closing their doors and relocating to these amazing new shopping centers, Colonial Plaza decided now's the time to hit the gas, and they started planning phase 2.
The year is 1961. The Cold War intensifies with the USSR building the Berlin Wall and testing several large bombs, but also putting the first man into space. Across the globe, the Bay of Pigs invasion is an unmitigated disaster for newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy, who much more successfully also launches the Peace Corps. The Freedom Riders test segregation laws as they ride racially integrated buses, while Barack Obama is born in Honolulu, Hawaii.
In Central Florida, the Colonial Plaza project has officially entered phase 2, and that is going to bring the addition of an enclosed climate-controlled area that had already been rolled out very successfully in Southdale Center in Edina, Minnesota.
Realizing that this closed concept was the future of consumer retail in America, and understanding that the daily thunderstorms in summer for Central Florida prevent many potential shoppers from being active during the rainy afternoons, the powers that be at Colonial Plaza invest into the newly enclosed concept, a first for the region and a herald of a new era of recreation and commerce for Orlando. With the addition of the newly enclosed area of Colonial Plaza and an additional 30 storefronts, retail space at the already mammoth plaza increases to 600,000 square feet, and, reflecting the times, enough space for 15,000 vehicles. Highlights of the upgrade would include a 1,200-seat movie theater, which now houses the Plaza Live concert venue, as well as the region's first 4-store department store, the enormous Jordan Marsh, which was placed in what would become the center of the facility, effectively splitting the facility into 3 sections, a decision that would ultimately prove disastrous 2 decades down the road.
Now, the 4-story Jordan Marsh also brought in very large escalators to move their patrons from one floor to the next. And while technologies of escalators had existed elsewhere in the country for decades and decades, it was the first time that they had really come to the region. So for the grand opening, the department store brought in stewardesses from Eastern Airlines to show patrons how to safely transition onto and then back off of the escalators.
The mall's original contract with Ronnie's Restaurant stated that the owners of the restaurant had exclusive veto power over any other potential eateries who were considering leasing space at the mall. So, while retail options continued to grow at Colonial Plaza, Ronnie's remained the only dining option. Because of this exclusivity, Ronnie's quickly became and remained a very popular meeting place in Orlando. In 1963, Sears gave up the ghost on its downtown Orange Avenue location and relocated to a standalone structure across the street from Colonial Plaza, sowing yet another seed for Colonial's eventual demise. But for the time being, Colonial was still growing. As the 1970s roll in, things have changed considerably, and not just for Colonial Plaza or even just Orlando, but for the world as a whole. The ratification of the 15th Amendment effectively gives all races the right to vote in America, and state-condoned racial segregation in public places begins to slowly be rolled back, though it is not without a fight. Riots spring up across the entire U.S. as young members of what will someday be known as the baby boomer generation take to the streets to forcefully protest racial injustice, the largely unpopular Vietnam War, and the way that young people and minorities have historically been treated by the government. Throughout the turmoil, inspiring moments shine through as well. Man Walks on the Moon for the first time, and a little music festival in rural New York unites people from across the world in a celebration of music, love, and peace.
We will bring a new world of entertainment, pleasure, and economic development to the state of Florida. Walt Disney.
And with that, Orlando and really all of Florida had changed forever as the tourist and the population centers of the state shift to Central Florida. The little big city of Orlando is suddenly fast-tracked for some of the fastest growth of any major metropolitan area. To this day, still some of the fastest the country has ever seen. But opening day for Disney World is still 5 years away.
As Walt's so-called Disney World prepares to open in 1971, the entire city begins to question just how it will affect the region. Tourists are expected to pour into the area in numbers that were previously unseen, but the Disney property is actually a 22-mile drive to the southwest of downtown Orlando, leaving business owners of Orlando proper with a conundrum. Do they invest in the infrastructure necessary to accommodate all of the incoming tourists and the new residents, when it is still yet to be determined if those people would find their way far enough north to actually spend the dollars that would be needed to make those investments pay off? Or do they hold off with a wait-and-see attitude and risk being at a disadvantage to early movers? Rolling the dice and wagering on its continued success, Colonial Plaza begins its second major expansion in 1972, adding a second climate-controlled indoor concourse, effectively increasing to 800,000 square feet of retail space spread over 100 businesses. The cost of this risky gamble? $8 million, nearly triple the original $3 million price tag when the plaza was constructed in 1955. Joining the Phase 3 lineup of the mall were retail mainstays Casual Corner, Walden Books, and Spencer Gifts, adding a touch of class to the mall and giving the residents of Orlando a convenient source for blacklight mushroom posters and obscenely shaped telephones. Colonial Plaza Mall was truly on top of the world. It wouldn't last much longer.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this 2-part series on Colonial Plaza. If you've enjoyed it, please consider hitting subscribe and ringing the notification bell. That way you'll be notified as soon as we release the second part of this series. Also, I'd always appreciate a thumbs up and maybe a share.
And we'll see you next time when we do just a little Splorin.